We often hear that diversity, equity, and inclusion matters to businesses, but their data tells a different story. So what is the missing piece? On Finding Diversity, we tell real stories of what has worked for others and provide experiences that will inspire you. I'm Justice Thompson, and this is where our journey begins. Welcome back to Finding Diversity, the Missing Piece. I'm your host, Justice Thompson, and today we had the privilege of welcoming Natasha Rainey, the founder and host of the All Inclusive podcast. Natasha's journey started with the birth of her daughter, inspiring her to launch a career dedicated to making a difference. Her podcast is a powerful platform focused on promoting diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Natasha's mission is to inspire organizations to create inclusive work environments reflecting the diversity of our world. Through storytelling, she shares insights from change leaders and aims to foster understanding and appreciation for diverse experiences. Join us as we discuss Natasha's journey and her impactful work in promoting inclusivity. Natasha, thanks for being here.
Thank you. I'm so excited for this.
It's so exciting. I have to say this is one of the most exciting podcasts, like interviews I have circled on my calendar because I never get to talk to another host. So I am so ecstatic that we get a chat.
Yeah, no, same. Like it's very, very, very few people that I get to speak to that also have a podcast as well. And so, yeah, I'm excited.
This is going to be fantastic. So we like starting with a little exercise we like to call Cape U. It's one thing about your younger self, one thing you like about your culture, or something unique about you. I'll kick us off. One thing unique about me is that I am notorious for not being very good at small talk. I'm just not a very good small talk guy, but I love deep conversations. So I love to have conversations and I love chatting with folks, but I've never been very good about talking about, how's the weather doing? Or, how's this football team doing? Like, it's just not, I'm not great at that side of conversation, something unique, a little quirky about me. But that's something about me. Now I'll throw it over to you.
Yeah. So do you want me to go through like younger self?
You can do each one of those, or you can pick one that kind of stands up if you have a story. So once again, it's one thing about your younger self, or you can do one thing you like about your culture, or something unique about you. Any one of those, all three of those, whatever you want to share.
Okay, I probably could roll all three into one thing anyway. So something that's about my younger self and fairly unique, I guess, is that I have an identical twin. So yeah, that's that.
That's great.
Yeah, so and we are extremely close. We are very, very close. And I think it's just great having someone who has been stuck with you from birth.
Yeah.
It's literally like having a built-in best friend. And in having that best friend with me, it means that she not only gets to share in the highs in my life, but she also gets to share in some of the lows. And it's someone that I can wholeheartedly be my complete and utter self, authentic self with, which is amazing. And it's definitely a gift. I'm so blessed. And we are still very, very much close. And I'm going to show my age, but I'm in my 30s now. So it's a long time.
That's fantastic, though. I think I had friends that lived across from me when I was growing up that were twins. And they were like inseparable. Like I never remember seeing one without the other. And they were older than me. They were like my big brothers, basically, like running around the neighborhoods being hooligans. But I just remember like I never saw them separated. And I just remember being so jealous of like, man, I have a sister, but I was like, I don't have a twin. Like that would be so awesome. Same clothes, same everything. I was like, man, you guys are awesome. I'm sure that got old at some point.
Yeah, no, it did. I mean, at the beginning when we were younger, like my mum would dress us up exactly the same, and like we'd have the same hairstyles. No one could tell us apart. But as we grew older, we kind of came into our own, and we did still have our own kind of interests and our own style. And that kind of moves on to what one of the things that I love about our culture is that it's our hair, and that we can express ourselves through our hair so uniquely and so creatively. And so that was one differentiating factor between me and my sister was our hair. So she, as we got older, she decided to shave her head. And so now
Wow.
she only has like, she's got most of it is shaven. She's only got like a little bit at the top, a little bit like, I don't know if you know the singer Emily Sandé.
I don't. I'm gonna look her
Yeah,
up though.
she's like, it's like basically shaven. She's got like low back and sides, and then it's just a bit of hair on the top, which she like curls and stuff like that. It's just it suits her
Oh,
so well.
yeah.
She's had that hairstyle for ages now, and it's just amazing. And then I've just got my like naturally like well natural hair, but then I've relaxed it. But with that, I do a number of different hairstyles. Like I'll do protective styles and I'll have it like in a bob. I'll cut it short. Like I had it like a Halle Berry short for my wedding. And then
Oh,
all of a sudden I decided to grow it out. And I'm like, no, I want a bob. And then I'm like, no, I want it long. It's just one of those things I
yeah.
love about our culture. And actually a couple of like the protective styles, that brings into like what's unique about me is that
Mhm.
I'm someone who with I can just see something and I could be like, you know what, I'm going to try that. I'm going to learn to do that.
Yeah.
So if I see like a hairstyle, like for example, like knotless braids, I can do that. I'm going to teach myself how to do that. I'll go on YouTube, do
That's
knotless
awesome.
braids, like, and now I can do them myself.
Yeah.
And my friends want me to do them for them, and I'm like, no. I'm like, oh my goodness. But yeah, that's one unique thing about me. It's just I think my creativity. I take things to a little bit to the next level.
No, I
So
absolutely love that. I think that's so brilliant. I actually grew my hair out to donate it. That's why my hair. So I've donated once. I'm growing it back out now to donate it
oh,
again.
that's fantastic.
Um, but yeah, I absolutely love that. And I think the best part about having a twin would be like whatever hairstyle they do or you do, she gets to kind of see what it would kind of look like. That's got to be awesome.
Yeah, no, it was fantastic. And then she shaved her hair, and I was like, "What are you doing? I need you. You're meant to be my mirror."
Oh,
So
that's
yeah,
too. Did you guys ever do the whole thing where like she took a test for you or you took a test for her?
we didn't do tests because I would not allow Natalie to take a test for me because then I would not pass. Uh,
Oh,
but we did used to swap classes. So,
oh,
like in
interesting.
secondary school, there was a couple of times where she would go into a class for me if I was just like, "Oh, do you know what? I really don't want to take history today. Like, can you just take it for me?" So yeah, and so she would sit in the class. I mean, we got found out. I think one time we got found out and we got a detention because our teachers realised that we'd swapped. I mean, all the girls in the class, because we went to an all girls school, so like
Yeah.
all the girls were like, "Yeah, oh my god, it's so sick." But then obviously our teachers were like, "No, this is unacceptable." So yeah, got that.
Yeah. It's always funny what's funny, like when you were like a kid and a student, then like now you get older and you're like, yeah, I don't know why we switched classes or like why we did it.
You know, when you're older, you're just like, "Wow, that was really silly and so
Yeah.
unnecessary." But I guess it's just the fun part about being a kid, right? You can just kind of break those rules, and it's just exploring yourself, finding
You always feel
yourself.
like such a rebel too when you're like breaking these rules. And when you get older, you're like, I was just being silly. Like there were no stakes, but it's just like funny looking back on it. You were like, yeah, I was a little rebel. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, no, definitely. But there were times where I think, given what I look like and where I come from as a black woman, as a black girl, um, in a private school, which was predominantly not as diverse as well, is predominantly kind of a lot of white students. There were only a very few of us. I think there were situations where actually breaking those rules, the repercussions were a lot more heavy-handed to us.
Mhm.
Which, when you're at that age, you don't really think about, you don't really see it like that. And yeah, and I guess that's probably was one of the starting points for me in realizing the difference between what I look like and what others look like, and how we are treated differently. I think that's probably where I first realized that.
I think it's interesting you say that. I think I also went to like a predominantly white school, public school, but it was a predominantly white school. And I think moments like those are when I started to realize, like, I think one of the moments I vividly remember is like when America, right, the civil rights movement comes up eventually every school year. And teachers would just look to me as the as the one black kid in the class. We get to that section of it, and all teachers just look at me to like have the response, right? They ask a question, what do you guys think of the civil rights? And it wasn't just like everyone would look to you. And I think that it was subtle things like that that I think made me start realizing, like, okay, like this is different. I think I had other experiences, obviously, but I think as a kid, I think I always grew up, and most kids do, thinking like school is a safe space. Teachers are people meant to protect you, meant to educate you. And this isn't to say like, it was a horrible experience by any means. I had great teachers, but I do think, whether intentional or unintentional, I did have a different experience, right? On what that was. Doesn't mean it's a bad or a good experience, but I do think it's something that is interesting to look at in the lens of like growing up. Like, what is that experience like? So I think that, thank you for sharing. I think that's an incredible, interesting point, and leads me to my first question, which is, you created this podcast. I love it. I've listened to a couple of episodes. It is absolutely fantastic. Listeners, please go check out this podcast, the All Inclusive Podcast. What made you start this podcast, and why is it so important to you?
So I started it through the encouragement of my husband. He's also a podcaster as well, and he does predominantly in HR. And he, in listening to the people and the HR leaders that he speaks with, I could hear that there was work being done in order to ensure that the workplaces that people were entering into were inclusive, and that people felt like that they could bring kind of their full selves to work, and that there was people, they could look around the office and they would see themselves, right? They could see others that are like them too. But it was something that I didn't really feel that I could have much involvement in.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because I work in financial services, and I have worked in financial services for like over a decade now. And so I'd experienced those microaggressions, those stories that we hear time and time again. I feel like from people from underrepresented groups, which isn't the greatest, of feeling like that you've been passed over, or that you are being kind of judged because of who you are. Those sorts of things like that. Unfortunately, those are some of the things that I experienced too. But as I said, listening to the HR leaders, I was like, from different organizations, I was like, oh, okay, fantastic. Like, there's work being done here. Great. And then I think it was when COVID hit, and I was about, my daughter was 3 by then. And I had already had those feelings of like not knowing who I was, like trying to find yourself again. I think after you have kids as a woman, you do lose a little bit of who you were before, like, because that person is no longer anymore, right? Like, who you were as not mum is completely different to who you are now becoming as having this little person that you're responsible for. And yeah, I kind of was losing myself a little bit in that. And in COVID, that's where I sat down and just reevaluated and was like, actually, you know what? Like, what do I care most about? What do I want to leave on this world? And it is ensuring that my daughter doesn't experience any of the things that I experience when she grows up and when she goes into the workplace. And so creating a platform to amplify leaders that are doing the work is my contribution to making sure that we do change, we move the dial.
Yeah. I love what you just said, because I think it's something that goes unsung. I think a lot of people who work in diversity go unsung, but I think a lot of their stories have their roots in something you shared, which I think is love. I think a lot of diversity professionals get into this field because of love, because the they don't want to see someone else experience the hurt that they themselves often have felt. And I think that's why this work is often so powerful. I often try to remind myself, when the work is hard and when you're talking to these diversity professionals, as you have as well, and when they're sharing these stories and sharing like the struggles of and the mental health that really goes in to dealing with not just the issues of being a person of color, of being people from these underrepresented backgrounds, but then trying to bring it into an organization that has all these problems and help the organization and their employees deal with the same things on top of what you're already dealing with. Like, the basis of that has to be love. Like it's just so much, and you have to have very broad shoulders to carry that. I think it's something very unique, and I just love the motivation behind it.
Yeah, and I am such a big believer of like the power of storytelling. And that's basically what I feel like the podcast also is. It's a way to bring those stories to life. Like I feel like stories have the ability to kind of break down the stereotypes and the biases, and it helps people to really see and connect on like a human level, right? Because like we can always, when someone tells a story, automatically you try and see where the similarities or where you could resonate, or where that connection can be, right? Whether it be, oh, I have a sister, or oh, I come from a single parent household too, or oh, I went to an all girls school, like that, do you know, those sorts of small things, because we're multifaceted people, right? So you
Mhm.
will always find there will be some sort of connection that you have with another individual.
I think that's such a good point. And just to share one of the stories that I love, and I'm sure you've got a bunch, and I'd love to hear them. Is I remember I was talking to is one of the guests we had on. It was after we had kind of wrapped up, and we were just kind of chatting. That she shared she was a woman of color. She shared with me something. We were just talking. She just shared a story of like because we were talking about this workplace that was kind of toxic. She shared a story with me. She used to put her hair in twists, and she was talking about like how early she had to wake up to put her hair in twists and all these types of things. But I had no idea how early. Like I have long hair, but like I ain't got to twist my hair. I can just wear it kind of how it is. So I'm very privileged, thankful for that. But she was like, "Yeah, I got to put my hair in twists," and did this thing. But she knew like one of the executives had a particular way they felt about that hairstyle. So she told me a story of how she woke up very early to get these twists, and she loved the way they look. And she was like, "Oh, I'm looking great." And she has very long hair, like probably down to like her chest, like very long hair. And so she puts her hair in twists, wakes up early, gets to work, and then a surprise meeting comes in. And then this person comes walking in, and she's like, "Well, shit," and just starts untwisting her hair that she had woken up like at 2 a.m. that morning to do, because she knew. She knew. She's like, "Look, this is a big meeting. I can't have this." So then she sits in her chairs and untwist it. And I think to me, I'm sure for her, it's like an off the cuff story. We're just having a conversation. But to me, it was so eye opening. I'm like, oh my gosh, I could not imagine waking up at 2 a.m. and then like being there and hurriedly undoing this hairstyle that I'd woken up early to do, just because this person walks in and I know the bias, like the amount of stress, right? That has to be on her on a day-to-day basis to do her hair, and she's accounting for who she's going to interact with the day, like all those things. I was like, I think those are stories that are extremely powerful to listeners, and I feel super privileged as a host to be able to share and be able to hear. But I think those are one of the things, and I'm sure you have a bunch that just kind of like speak to you and changed my view on Black women and their hairstyle and what it takes. Dude, that's why you don't touch the hair. Like, I'm sorry, dude, do not touch Black women's hair. I don't know how many times we got to say it. Stop touching the hair.
No, I know, it's so, oh God. Um, but yeah, it's great that like you were able to hear that and understand that in that small story, like that small experience, which could so easily be glossed over, right? You could so easily overlook it. But and maybe she herself, and I know that I've been um I've done this quite a few times, is that there's been situations that have happened to me that I'm just like, you don't even think about it. Like it is just what it is, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, I've got a big meeting. I need to make sure, oh, I've done something very similar. I've made sure that my hair is relaxed. I've taken my braids out and specifically made sure that my hair was relaxed and straightened for the next day because I had a big meeting. Because I didn't think that they would take me seriously if I had my hair in any other style, which was more conforming to what they're like a traditional um kind of Caucasian woman would have, like straight kind of hair. And it's something that I've never really thought twice about
Mhm.
until as I've gotten older, I've been like, actually, you know what? Like, no, like I shouldn't, like what my hair looks like does not have any sort of bearing in my performance or anything really,
Yeah.
negative. So yeah, it's ugh.
And I think that the latter part of what you shared is something that's so important. I struggle with in my journey and stepping into kind of who I am is you in anybody listening, like you don't have to step into it today. And sometimes I feel like there's expectations by some people. Some people are born knowing who they are. Like I've had friends who I'm like, from the time we grew up, they knew who they were. They were unapologetic about who they were. They always wore their hair natural. They're like, look, this is who I am. You can deal with it, whatever. It took me a while. It took me a while to understand, like, no, I'm not gonna present a particular way or speak a particular way because that's how your expectations are. But I think it's okay to have the confidence to step into your own journey because at the end of the day, it is your own journey. And I think that's something that I wish we would do more of is
Mm,
accepting that, right? You don't have to be here now. You don't have to be, yourself and be completely because it's a journey, right? We're always constantly evolving, which relates back to diversity and inclusion and the fact of like it's not no one gets there. Like I always think it's funny, and I'm sure you've talked to guests, like it's not a destination. It's not this place that we're gonna get to and it's gonna be this idyllic society. The idyllic society is one that is constantly learning and on a journey of perfection and continuing trying to pursue an ideal. It's not the actual achievement of the thing. It's the progression and journey and creating, I think, hopefully a generation of folks that question things, that are willing to say, okay, is that truly the right behavior? And not have an existential crisis on asking, oh, I guess there could be some bias there. And I think that's huge.
definitely. And I think um, it's it goes to knowing that when you know that it's a journey, then you know and you understand why it's so important to meet people where they are because they may not be there yet. And
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. But you can kind of guide them and explain and educate them in order to get them to where they need to be and in order to get them on the right track, right? Um, so yeah, I think it's an ongoing journey we're on, and I
Yeah.
think it's not. I feel like it's not linear. Is it? Yeah,
Yes.
linear.
Yeah. Yeah. I got
It's not like bumps in the road. There's gonna be bumps in the road. We're gonna take some turns, twists and turns, right? And so, yeah,
I think that's such a good point. And I think it goes back to kind of we're both hosts of a podcast. And one of the things that like we talked about in our pre-call planning is we don't always agree with our guests. But that's not the point. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that because I have a whole spiel on this. But what do you think about that?
yeah. I do you know what? It's one of those things where I think it's important if we're advocating and we are promoting inclusivity and we're saying it's a journey, we need to meet people where they are. It's so important that when you are confronted with somebody who has a conflicting ideology or perspective, that you're respectful, um, and you are able to articulate your own perspectives and your own views in a way that they can relate to and understand, maybe. And I think the goal isn't to change their mind. I think the goal should be to try and get them to understand where you're coming from and to understand what your lived experience was in order to get you to that thought process and then for them to somewhat maybe relate to where you're coming from, right? So that's how I go into it if I have somebody that is saying something that I'm like, no.
No, I think that's perfect. I think that's exactly kind of the what I couldn't have said any better. Like I think for me it's the same thing where like we don't have to agree. And like we said, it's not a linear journey. There's also not one path to this idea like future presenting. Like if I'm wrong, prove me wrong. Like it doesn't hurt my feelings,
Yeah.
attack me, or like there this is just someone trying to achieve work and trying to do things. I may not agree with how they're doing it, but I also think my job specifically as a host is I feel like I have a duty to the listeners to make sure that they hear that because not everyone has the same solution. I think, I work with my dad on a diversity company and we've done consulting things together. We have different approaches. Like we have very similar things in a lot of things. So obviously I grew up with him and like, but we have different approaches. He tends to take a very data driven approach of like everything is data, everything is this, which is fantastic. And I love, and I have that type of approach, backing me up, but I tend to like to lead with people and connections. Like I want data to support, but I think like I've always been someone who just wants to know why you tick. Why do you think that? Like I remember one of my one of my friends, like the first time I met him, like said some crazy racist shit. And I called him out on it. And I was like, dude, what are you doing? Like this is like who like I didn't know him. I was like, dude, this is like just called him out, said, yo, this is like not this, whatever. But he was receptive. He had never been around. Like I went to school in college. I got recruited to play football at middle of nowhere, Nebraska, which for our folks that aren't in the US is a very white state with a bunch of farmers. Like it is just rural. And so I went out there to go play football and everyone was white. Some people came from towns where they'd never seen a black person except for on the TV. Like they'd never met one. And so, that's where he came from. We just had a conversation and we talked and he was like, oh, yeah, I guess I don't really hold those beliefs. But like obviously I wasn't like I was being buddy buddy with him. Like it was very confrontational, but it was respectful. Like you can have a confrontational conversation, but still have it be respectful. And I think that's oftentimes what I hear some people like, oh, I wouldn't have been able to sit there and have so and so say that. I'm like, well, just because I sit here, I listen and I respond doesn't mean I believe what they say or I'm agreeing with them. But it does mean I'm going to respectfully disagree with them. And I think sometimes people think like that inclusion or inclusivity does not mean tension. It means we can have tension but still have a conversation. And I think that is what sometimes gets lost in translation. Sometimes with guests, sometimes with hosts. But I think it's so incredibly important to the conversation and dialogue we're trying to promote in this field.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's it's that fear piece, right? I think is that people are fearful of saying the wrong thing
Mm-hmm.
and being perceived a certain type of way. And I know when we talk about allies, that's one thing that I think prevents people from being the best effective ally is because of that they're fearful of saying the wrong thing. But
Mm-hmm.
actually, I think it's more important that the message that we're giving is that we want you to do what you feel is best and we want you to take some sort of action, right? Speak up,
Mm-hmm.
advocate.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do, if you get it wrong, we aren't going to chastise you. We're not going to be like, oh my God, I knew it. Like, no, it's like, okay, actually, here's some feedback, right?
Yeah.
Here's where you could have done this better. I feel like that's the sort of language that we should be really using.
And I think that's such a great point because I think what oftentimes is left out of this is what you just said, the fear component and hurt. Like hurt comes along with fear. So sometimes like I look back at some of the responses I've had to friends, to colleagues, to sometimes even work situations of like where I was very poignant with my responses. I think so, and I think sometimes it's that I'm hurt in that moment. And sometimes we need to create this space for someone to be hurt before you try to respond or correct. And that's okay because when you think about these spaces, we're dealing with identity. Is there anything more centric to a person than their identity? So you have to allow there to be hurt and like understand as an ally, you might say something that is hurtful and those people may understand that you are not doing that intentionally, but you have to allow the space for me to still be hurt. And I think
Mm,
sometimes people want to be able to have these and engage in these, but not have that tension that comes from someone being hurt. Like, I'm frustrated. Like, I think one of my friends, I remember recently, it was like last year, big snowboarder. You can see I have my snowboard in the background. I'm a big snowboarder. I love snowboarding. I live in Colorado, so near the mountains. And we do this trip with me and my college buddies that are football players every once in a while where we get together, we go up. And we went up, and like I said, I went to school at a very conservative, very opposite of very of almost all the views I hold to myself, school. And they started talking about uh, Donald Trump and that police brutality. Like we started talking about things that normally I'm okay having conversations about. But I had just gotten out of a very intense consulting contract that I had to deal with a lot of tension with our client on trying to get them to understand different things, having to hold my temper. I couldn't. I was like, dude, in tears, I was like, dude, I can't talk about this right now. Like, I love you guys, but I cannot talk about this. Like, can we just go snowboarding? Like, and I couldn't really even articulate how I usually pride myself on articulating like my pain or concepts. But this is how I knew they were my friends. They were like, oh, okay, dude, like let's talk about something else. Like they didn't hold it against me. They didn't like it was just like, okay, that's good. And I think that's what we need to have in these conversations is that space to be heard, to be like, okay, I can't talk about this today. Like I can't educate you today. I can't have this conversation, this natural tension, and that's okay. Like, of course, we come back and we had the conversation later. Like once we had snowboarded a little bit, we talked about it, and I told him, oh, I don't agree with you on this. This is what I believe, whatever, and everything was fine. But I think that's something that is vitally missing from some of these conversations is there is tension, there is hurt, needs to be space for that.
And also, like, just coming at it from a slightly different angle for you in what you just shared, I think it's important that whoever's listening is that they notice that you as a practitioner, you go in snowboarding, like there's an emotional toll that's taken on someone that is trying to advance and the change that we're trying to do, right? And in that, you need to make sure that you can take some time out for yourself and protect your own mental health, and ensuring that you're surrounding yourself with people that are understanding of that um, is so important. And I think that is, in you telling that story, it not only highlights the fact that is you want to make sure that we can kind of create that space where that hurt can be felt and we can move on from it, but it's also that you are conscious of your own mental health and your own well-being, and that you actually feel comfortable and it's okay to be like, actually, you know what, I'm done. Like I'm at my max now. I need a bit of a break.
Yeah. I think that's such a good point, and I've heard you talk about this before in some other interviews. Is mental health. Like I think mental health of practitioners is something that we need to talk about. Like, do you have any stories about that, and what have people shared with you?
So yeah, through the conversations that I've had, I know a lot of leaders, it is about knowing when to take some time away. And as I said, there's a number of things that I find it's going to be personal to that individual, but in general, I feel that one of the key things that I've noticed in the conversations that I've had that works is having a network of people that can relate to what your day to day looks like. It's not always easy to find, um, but it is, when you have it, it makes all the difference. And so, whether that be you connecting with other leaders through networking events or just reaching out to them on LinkedIn, um, I think that plays a big part in helping to protect your own mental health with a lot of the emotional toll that it does take sometimes.
I think it's such a good point. I think what I hear a lot from leaders as well, and guests on the podcast is exactly what you said, right? Having people around you that can relate is incredibly important. And I think what sometimes people who don't understand, like for you, oftentimes if you're not a practitioner, you don't do it. You're like, this is just something I talk about. This is just a topic and something that I'm relatively passionate about. I would love to talk about BLM, and I'd love to talk about police brutality, or I'd love to talk about, um, you know, women getting compensated fairly as equivalent to men. Like it's something I'd love to talk about. It's just dinner room conversation. To practitioners all the time, it's work. It's like I actually educate people on this and talk about it and read about it every single day. And that for me is like my 9 to 5. And so I know we're having drinks right now at a bar, but like this isn't fun for me. And oftentimes like they're not in situations where it's like you don't read it from 9 to 5. And so sometimes I think it's dismissive of like, oh, well, I don't really believe that. And it's like, look, like, not to say it, but like if I had a law degree right now and we were talking about the law, like you would probably say, oh, no, you probably have a pretty good understanding of what the law is. And I think that level of dismissiveness is one of the reasons this conversation is hard when I talk to leaders, is like when you talk about people outside of it, they don't understand your background or just trying to have a casual conversation with you. It's not the same. So having people, I think, that really can relate and having that network of folks is incredibly, incredibly important. But that's incredibly well said. So one of the other questions I have is listeners. I think one of the big things and reasons we have this podcast, right, is number one, because people hopefully listen to it and take something away from it. What is one of the things that like you really enjoy about kind of your listeners and people who listen to your podcast?
I enjoy that they come from all different parts of the world. I'm just little old me here in the UK, tiny little, or actually very small on the map, but we don't actually want to say, we don't say that. But yeah, it's great to hear from people and to know that there's people listening from all different parts of the world, because there is there is uniqueness within that, right? They have their own different, there are different cultures there, and they're going through different things. They're at different points in their DEI journeys, and so it's great that they're able to still tune in and take nuggets from the conversations that I'm having, and then kind of take that away and try and put it into motion where they are. Yeah, I love that.
I think that's fantastic. One of the things that made me think of is, are there any topics or any conversations that you would have loved to have with a guest or cover for your listeners that you haven't had the opportunity to yet?
Oh, oh, that's a good question. Um, no, I don't know. Oh, that is such a good question.
Yeah.
Um, you know what? I do wish that it's quite difficult because you want people to open up, right?
Hmm.
And we, when I'm on the podcast, we talk about challenges and things like that. But I would, one area that I think that I would really like to talk about more on is just how you are able to stay confident in yourself, like that, that imposter syndrome.
Hmm.
That's one area that I would really like to, I haven't really explored as much. And I think it's important because when you're talking about um, creating inclusive environments, and also kind of especially gender parity, one of the reasons why you find, or we've seen, and it's statistically proven why women don't, are not where they should be in the leaderboard, is because they wait until the very point where they're pretty much already doing the job to
Hmm.
even apply,
Yeah.
right? And they're going above and beyond before they even decide to put themselves forward. Whereas their male counterparts, they might be doing maybe one or two of those things that make that job description, but they'll still go for it anyway. They'll still go for that job anyway.
Hmm.
And I find, me as personally, I get that imposter syndrome quite often. So yeah, that's an area that I probably would really like to explore a little bit more.
I love that. I think I know that the study you're talking about. I think it was like women wait till they meet. It was like 95 or 98% of the criteria on a job description, and men, if they meet like one or two things, like maybe 5% of what they're, I could do this. I could do this. Come on, man. But I think it's
No, that sounds
yeah,
sad. That's the sad part. Like, it's the tragedy.
yeah, and I think that's kind of something interesting, and I think imposter syndrome. It's funny you say this because someone came to mind, and it's Deion Sanders. I don't know if you're keeping track of American college football. Probably not. But
That
college football.
sounds familiar.
Yeah,
I
so
don't
right.
know that well, but that name
Deion
sounds.
Sanders, American football player, one of the best DBs ever historically, was known for kind of talking his smack. I think it's confidence to me. He's just a very confident black man who's, like, yeah, I'm the best corner in the league. What do you mean? Like, he's not better than me. So he's like, that was the kind of guy he was. Well, he got into coaching. He coached at historically. Well, he coached before this, but I'm going to skip some of his early career. He's coaching his kids as they grew up. Got a university job at a historical black college, and now most recently got a job at CU Boulder as their head coach, and has been playing a lot of games. And I think what I saw before the season, because I'm a big sports guy, sorry for the huge analogy here, but was a lot of people looking at him like, man, they're going to win one game, because that college football team, had won one game last year. So they're like, man, he's not going to win any football games. He's bringing people in. Everyone was questioning everything he did. He basically, got rid of a bunch of players, brought a bunch of new college players in. Everyone's like, who does that? I can't believe he's doing this. Blah, 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 blah. He's not very good. The whole time, you got to give this guy credit. The whole time he has been, we're a great football team. We will win games. We expect to be in the national championship race. They opened the game against TCU, who was one of the top 4 teams last year, and beat them. Then they went 3-0. They just lost 2 games to USC and Oregon. But it was a great game. And I think even when he loses, he has confidence of, no, we're supposed to be in this game. No, I didn't expect to lose. I expect to win. We didn't play up to our standards. And you can see it in in the kids that he coaches and all that kind of stuff. And for me as a black man looking, I'm like, yeah, that's confidence. Because he never disparages anybody. He never says, "No, we should have beat him because that coach is trash and those kids aren't very." He always says, "No, that's the standard I hold for myself. Of course, I deserve to be here. My expectation is that when I show up, I'm going to win." And I think for me, just because we're talking about this concept, right, of imposter syndrome, I feel imposter syndrome all the time. I remember I got into Techstars, which was like a big startup thing, and I was like, I'm the youngest kid in this room. Like, I'm not supposed to be. I'm not supposed. I don't know if y'all know this, but I'm not supposed to be in this room. I'm too young. I got no experience. But like, I think after seeing that, now that I'm a little bit older and I've seen that, I'm like, man, I wish I would have seen Deion Sanders early, because it would have given me the confidence to be like, look, I'm not saying I'm better than anybody in this room, but I am saying I'm confident in who I am and what I know I can do. And I know that I can do what I believe to be a good job, and that's enough. And so to me, I think seeing Deion Sanders has been great for me this last year. I'll be like, man, my confidence is through the roof. This guy has helped me out so much. But I think it's such a great story that we all struggle with. We can all take something away from Deion Sanders. That's what I'm trying to do. Everyone take something away from Deion Sanders. Go buy some gear, support my guy up here, CU Boulder. Help him out. Prime time, you know what it is. But
I
yeah.
mean, that story hasn't convinced me to watch football. However, it has convinced me to follow him specifically.
Yeah. I like football like that guy. I'm telling you, he is a showman. He is an absolute showman. I absolutely love how he responds, because they just, they're supposed to lose by, I don't know, a bunch of points this last week in the USC. They lose by 1 touchdown. And he comes back after the show, and all the reporters, because he's so confident the whole time. I think everyone is ready for, like, oh, I'm going to get you now. I'm going to break you down, because I think that's the society we live in. They want to break you down. If you act confident, you come out and say that you think you're this, and you stumble or step, they're going to try to come after you. Just calmly said, no, I'm really, really proud of our boys. Of course, this isn't what the outcome I wanted, but we're going to keep working. And one of the quotes he had is, "You better get me now." He's like, "I'm gonna be better next year, so you better get me now." And like, I was like, I love that, like that type of just kind of energy and self belief. Like, I absolutely loved it. I think it's given me a lot of, and hopefully, I'm gonna keep emailing you about him. So hopefully, I can get you to watch some college football.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, I mean, it's the same for me. It was like with Coco Gauff.
Yeah.
I don't know if I pronounced her surname correctly from my accent, but when she won the tennis,
Yeah.
like when she was like, "Thank you to all those people who didn't believe in me," like
Yeah.
ignited my fire. Like I was just like, "Oh yes,
Yes.
yes."
Yes.
So I
Yes.
feel like it's just one of those situations, one of those moments that you're just like, yeah, like actually, you know what? Keep that hate coming, because it's only gonna just put that flame up me, and it's just only gonna keep me going even more. So yeah, I think it just shows like how much representation matters.
Mm-hmm.
Having those people in the world reaching the standards that they've reached, and then just making that commentary just is just so impactful.
I think this is brilliant, and I want to keep talking about this, but we're getting close to time here, so I have to ask you our last question, which
Oh, yeah.
is, what is the missing piece? We know there's not one missing piece when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and there's multiple things that need to be moved forward. But if you had to pick one thing, what would that be?
Oh, one thing. I think I would have to say, I want to say inclusion.
Okay.
And I know like people would be like, inclusion, like that's not missing, like that's in the acronym DEI. But but I think that actually when you think about it, we focus quite a bit on the diversity aspect,
Mm-hmm.
but and so it gets overshadowed. And I think we're missing the inclusion really needs to be at the forefront, because once you make an environment somewhere that everyone feels happy to be in, then you already have the diversity. You've already done it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to try and get all these different people, because then when you do, it's like, well, how do they feel when they're actually in the door?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's one thing that I feel like we're missing, is that understanding that we need to ensure that we prioritize inclusion, and that we are creating these environments that people feel like that they truly can bring their full selves to work, and that they feel like they can be heard, and that they feel safe to be able to air any grievances that they may well have, or any bad experiences that they are experiencing. They're open to be able to share that.
Well, that is fantastic. Such a great thing for us to end on. Where can people find you or check out your podcast?
Oh yeah, so it's All Inclusive with Natasha Rainey. Is the podcast. You can find it on all the usual podcast platforms: Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts. Best way to reach me is through LinkedIn. So Natasha Rainey, just type me in. I don't think there's any others, but yeah, I should come up. And yeah, feel free to reach out to me. I love to speak with people, connect with new people. So yeah.
Well, Natasha, thank you so much for being on. This has been one of my favorite conversations of the season so far. So I'm super, super excited for everyone to be able to listen to that. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. And we'll catch you next time. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for listening to Finding Diversity, the Missing Piece. You can expect new episodes monthly. And if you like the show, please subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. This helps others, like you, find the show. Finding Diversity, the Missing Piece, is powered by Cape Inclusion. It's produced by Studio D Podcast Production, directed by Prescott Wong, and hosted by me, Justice Thompson. To learn more about how you can get started and to book a demo, visit us at capeinclusion.com.